what specific changes would you, or the sector, need to see to really help this scale up in a fast way? I mean, you talk about wanting to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas from new buildings by 2020. If you can make that simpler, that would help. So what kind of program would speed that process along?
Mm-hmm. Well, basically the challenges that are facing the existing certification programs is that, of course, they are gaining momentum. They're getting down to the ground and acceptance. And for that matter, of course, they have a limited achievable baseline. So as for at least 10 years, most of these certification systems internationally have developed. They have raised the bar. They have the version 1, version 2, version 3, incorporating more stringent conditions for performance of the building in terms of energy efficiency and environmental performance. But some of the elements that are missing are precisely, as we mentioned here, the concept of life cycle assessment, which is, I think, El Dorado in building material that we should get there sometime soon, and the concept of social equity. Unfortunately, I think we've been very much focusing on energy and the environment, to say something, but mostly in developing or emerging economies, the social aspect is very, very important. So we want to incorporate those elements into this new version, this new generation of green building certification programs. So basically, if we can have these new versions available soon, and there's a few of them already working on this concept of the living building or living communities. I think we will be very, very close to achieve the goals that we have stated in terms of energy efficiency in particular and greenhouse gas reductions overall. So the language has changed. I think we have over the 10 years connected the dots. It was an original challenge to speak the right language to different stakeholders in the building and construction industry. But we have achieved that. So we expect that the development of these new evaluation tools will come along very quickly, and especially if they are supported like international initiatives, like the Common Carbon Metrics, where different organizations, the United Nations, and some other developers of green building certification programs are getting to an agreement on the basic units and concepts that should be incorporated into every green building system and how they will be reporting their greenhouse gas emissions and performance.
I'm going to ask this question to Dennis, but if anyone else wants to jump in, that's fine as well. You know, when we look at negotiations at the actual UNFCCC, the issue is always often developed versus developing nations. We saw that in Copenhagen. I'm sure we'll see it again in Cancun and going forward. Looking at this from a business perspective, is that a way to get around this? I mean, can you carry out, whether it's ICT or any other sector, these sort of pledges in a developing country with businesses being done in a developing country the same way you could in a developed nation, or do you still see some of that gap or that needs to be closed in negotiations?
Well, I think this is a really interesting question where I think business has a really important role to play also, because there has been a tendency to have a little bit of a protectionistic approach when it comes to sustainability. I was very happy to hear the Undersecretary talk about that earlier also, because the kind of statement that we heard, for instance, when it comes to renewables from the United States, people will not accept that for any other sectors. You know, we will grow us, we will protect us, we will do these things. And I think that this is where business needs to come together also and say, that's not the way forward. We need to collaborate our way. We need to have global collaborations. We need a cluster approach to these things. And this is what we see also, people being inspired by each other. And I think that's also how, especially a new group of entrepreneurs. I just have to mention, when I was here yesterday, I said that we set up this transformatorsolutions.net. And yesterday there was 1 billion tons of potential for 2020. Today it's 250 million tons more. So only during this day when we set up this page, and I don't know, probably some of you contributed to that, and these coming from all over the world. And I think there's this tension between a new generation of entrepreneurs who have friends all around the world, see themselves as global citizens, and this quite nationalistic blame game that is going on. And that's where I think the solutionist approach is so important also, because so far it's been about who should reduce what. Now we can discuss how do we collaborate to provide solutions. And that's a totally different approach. And sometimes I feel maybe we need a new challenging body, a few progressive countries coming together and saying, this is not working anymore. You have a bunch of environmental people thinking about problems. We need a broader coalition sort of getting geared up here now. But it's such potential. And you look in this room, you see all the people ready to deliver, and then you see this problem approach and blame game going on. And it's just growing that tension.
What I would say is that actually this also presents a very unique opportunity for leapfrogging technologies. If you go into a country that is not burdened by the existing infrastructure, they could jump and they can take advantage of the best of the breed that we have right now. You can have a village develop in a rural area and it can be electrified in a matter of weeks if you have a microgrid or renewable energy technologies. They can have access through telecommunications to education and healthcare. We can bring these communities into the 20th century with distributed generation and a diverse convergence of technologies much faster and much more efficiently with less burden on resources than with traditional infrastructures that take decades to build, permit, run wires, and then pollute the environment. So I think that there is a very, very unique opportunity for technology transfer. I think there's a burden on developed nations that have developed these technologies to transfer them and to make sure that we have the right frameworks, the education, and the outreach to be able to implement, and we should have the finance capability to finance in terms of microfinancing and low-cost money.
Go ahead.
I suppose I would offer that the Coca-Cola Company might be a reasonable proxy for how we do this in the developing countries, because we operate in 200 countries around the world, and we're largely a local business, but operating in all those local communities around the world. And our supply chains for many of our input commodities are local, particularly the agricultural ones. And the growth that we expect in our business comes largely from the developing countries. That's what we're looking at over the near-term future. So we have a business obligation and a business opportunity to invest in those sustainable supply chains in those developing countries, and we may be able to help facilitate replication of those better technologies that can be more sustainable.
I'm going to open it up to the floor. If anyone wants to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. We also have translation if you want to ask your question in Spanish. Right about 2 rows from the back. These guys' hand up right there.
Thank you. I'm Chris Tappan from BT. One of the things that a number of the panelists have said is that it would be so much better if we didn't have country-level reporting requirements and that there was a global standard and that all countries kind of supported that. I would absolutely support that and even suggest that gets promoted from a sectoral level content in the statement up to the initial part of the statement. In terms of the ICT sector one, Dennis, I would like to suggest that the wording we ask individual country policymakers to help isn't strong enough, and we need much stronger input from the policymakers in terms of policy intervention. And I was particularly struck by the building sector recommendations to national policymakers, and I think that's exactly the kind of policy intervention that's required, and if that happens, I think that would really support the smart building piece that we've been looking for in our sector. So, and then translate that into the other sort of enabling component parts. And then, if I may, a question, and the energy one. 100% renewables by 2050 is a great objective. In Northern Europe in January of this year, the wind stopped blowing. There was a high over Northern Europe for days on end, and the wind stopped blowing. Can we realistically expect the lights to stay on if we have 100% renewables? And Is the energy sector really saying that there is no role for carbon capture and storage and nuclear, which is the implicit, what comes out of that implicit message? And then the second question is energy equal electricity? Is this statement about electricity or is it about energy? Because if you look at, for example, the European renewables target, that talks about energy, not electricity, so it covers heat, for example. And a number of the European leaders made a big mistake when they were negotiating that, because they thought they were negotiating electricity and actually they were negotiating an energy target. So is the recommendation 100% of energy, including heat and other uses of energy, or is it electricity? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And we like to think of renewable energy as a symphony. It is not only one resource. You've got a myriad resources that are interconnected, and they're interconnected through the grid. You've got technologies in terms of storage that are available right now, whether it's compressed air, whether it's pumped storage, whether it's batteries, whether it's fuel cells, and it's an issue of cost, and it's an issue a little bit of breakthrough in what do you implement. So you can have an effective storage technologies that would allow for those slumps in energy generation. Also, we've got very good weather models that can predict what and when the wind will be blowing and how much and the sun shining. And they can be pretty accurate. We also have a grid that can transfer energy, such as hydropower, which is available 24/7, geothermal, which is available 24/7, biofuels, if they're carbon neutral, which can be available 24/7. So you can have a symphony and a conglomerate of technologies that are available and can easily meet the 100% requirements for your fuels, for electricity, for heating, and indeed for ground transportation as well, we'd like to say. So we don't want to incrementalize and say, oh no, we're only shooting for 100% here, but not actually here, and try to get away from that overall commitment. It's possible, it's there. We certainly don't need nuclear. It's a waste issue of what do you do with waste, which is radioactive for 50,000 issue. It's a safety issue. It's a proliferation issue. It's a fear that we don't need to have, and it's a method of dividing the world into the worthy ones that can have it and the unworthy ones that don't, the ones that are the safe nations and the rogue nations. It's an issue of security and what costs do you have in terms of securing those nuclear power plants. Those are incredible costs that we don't always account for. And it is the only energy resource that requires the government to indemnify it from any insurance requirements in case of an accident. Anybody receive any kind of restitution because of Chernobyl? I don't think so. Or any other radioactivity. If Indian Point were to be blown up, or San Onofre, which is one of the most affluent areas in the United States, or if it were to have a leak, your property values would go down tremendously. There will be no indemnity whatsoever. There's no insurance. So nuclear is a non-issue.
Next question.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask about the products and the components of the products. If these big companies that you all represent can improve in making materials that are more, that have a long life for the future generations. For example, cellular phones, when they came with another cellular phone, they throw away the last cellular phone, and those is pollution for our environment. And also, there are many products on buildings and industries and technologies and everything that they only make those products, and they don't take care for the next period of the or the evolution of the product and how will it be treated. For example, bottles of the water and many things. And I believe that perhaps you can give me some advice. How can this company be concerned about these issues, if it's possible, and if they are interested in trying to make something about the products, as in Europe that they have a very strong policies related to these topics. Thank you very much.